Buonasera a tutti.
So good evening everyone, and welcome to this event organized by Trace, the international magazine of communion and liberation. We are here at the Rimini meeting with the Trace in the Trace Arena in Pavilion A3. But this session is taking place here in this room so that the many people who would like to follow us can sit comfortably. This here, right at the meeting, we're launching something completely new. Trace is getting a makeover, so I'd like to kindly invite you to visit us at our stand in Pavilion A3. Trace is becoming a digital magazine in order to better enjoy the contents. The aim of Trace is always the same, which is that of to tell the life of the movement and offer an interpretation of reality rooted in faith. And this is actually what we do at the Trace Arena, like the one we are hosting now. Nothing is enough for love, that's the title, and that is also the phrase that is pronounced by Don Rodrigo, one of the main characters of Paul Claudel's 1952 poetic drama, The Satin Slipper, through which Don Paolo Prosperi, a priest at the Fraternity of St. Charles, will guide us this evening. So nothing is enough for love. This is a phrase that speaks of man who faces the tragedy of not being enough for himself, of the desire which precisely when he encounters something great and beautiful, he discovers that he wants more, that he desires more. And this is one of the most important themes developed by Paul Claudel, who is an author who was very dear to Father Giussani, who described the Annunciation to Mary, Claudel's other most famous work, as the greatest poem of the last century. And he said that our movement was born out of this text. Claudel, through a very tangible human story, Claudel shows what Giussani defines, and I quote, God's invitation to take one's rightful place in the world, end of quote. This is an invitation that cannot but pass through the cross, but from the cross to the resurrection, not in the hereafter, but here. And there was another quote by Claudel. And this is what happens to the protagonist, Violaine, a very beautiful character, very dear to me. And as a matter of fact, one of my daughters' name is Violaine. But this evening, however, we're here to discuss the Satin Slipper. I must be honest, I read it this summer specifically to prepare for this meeting, and whilst reading it, there was a few passages that Father Paolo and I found ourselves discussing. Some of them even today remain an open question for me. I believe that the interesting thing of a session like this one at the meeting is precisely the meeting gives us the opportunity to discuss open topics, topics that deserve being delved into, not only here but also beyond the four walls of the Rimini meeting. So my invitation for you, our invitation for you this evening, is to be challenged by Claudel by this phrase, nothing is enough for love. So Father Paolo, you have the floor. Over to you. So I'm going to read so that I will be as short as possible. So Claudel, as one of his readers, Van Balthasar, was actually yearns for the world. There's only the pagans that before him, not the Christians. And yet Claudel yearns for the world precisely because he is a Christian. No Christian philosopher, theologian, mystic or poet has experienced the horizon of the world in such a disruptive way. Van Balthasar, who was like Don Giussani, was one of the most passionate and attentive readers of Claudel in general and of the Little Satin Slipper in particular, pronounced this sentence. And on the other hand, as a fervent Catholic, Claudel also knows that it is in God and in God alone that man's infinite desire for happiness finds fulfillment. And that every earthly good is given to him as a sign of God and as a path leading to him. except that there is a way of understanding this relationship, this sign that is inherent in all that is beautiful in the world, starting with the most alluring beauty of all, so the face of a woman to a man and vice versa, which risks reducing the finite sign to a rung on a ladder, serving only insofar as it leads beyond itself, and then once you've used it, you throw it away. In an ascent towards God that requires the renunciation of all worldly affection and the withering away of all earthly eros. There are Christian spiritualities who have proposed this kind of vision. This is not Claudel's one. Of course, one cannot deny that the Christian life, lived to the full, requires living everything for the Lord, so actually giving Him the first place. And yet, didn't Jesus also promise 100-fold here on earth to those who abandon everything for Him? The answer, as we know, is yes, and yet the question remains. Is it really true that leaving the man or the woman for whom one's heart burns can be the path to a possession? We may call it this way, using a term by Giussani, a possession that is 100 times deeper and joyful of that very good which one has renounced. This, it seems to me, is the great question at the very heart of the Satin Slipper. As von Balthasar so rightly observed. And again, I quote, "How is it possible to belong at the same time completely to the world and completely to God?" End of quote. Can earthly joy be reconciled with the worship of the God of the cross? The story of the love between Rodrigo and Prodezza, in all its tortuous complexity, contains, in a certain sense, Claudel's attempt to answer this question. Balthasar goes on and writes, and I quote, that Rodrigo and Prodezza are the first true couple of Christian lovers in world literature, precisely because their great earthly passion is immediately recognized as a religious matter. In what sense? In what sense can an impossible love, as we shall see shortly, become a religious matter? So, a good that contributes to the manifestation of the glory of God in the world, and not only in the life of the two lovers. So, in its ability of bringing fruits and therefore of being wanted by God. The journey through the pages of the Satin Slipper that I am about to read to you has no other purpose than to attempt to answer this question, since it is a very, very complicated work of art if you approached it. So, the idea is basically to try and to fully understand the meaning and the fil rouge of this story. So let us begin from the prologue, from the beginning. That's probably the most famous page of this work of art. And this work of art basically offers us a decisive interpretation of this. It seems to us that the author is keen to make us understand right from the start that the love between Rodrigo and Prodezza, though out of the ordinary, will not only be used by God for good. What is more, divine providence is, in fact, at the very origin of this great passion, given that it seems in every respect to have been kindled in response to a prayer, not the prayer of one of the two lovers, but rather the prayer that Rodrigo's Jesuit brother addresses to God before dying, hanging from the main mast of the ship on which he shipwrecked off the North African coast. So he basically he prays God for his brother. Before reading the text of this famous prayer, let us spend a few words to set the scene. So first, we are at the end of the 16th century, beginning of the 17th century. The scene is the world. This is what Claudel says. In particular, he is zooming in on the deeply Catholic Spain of Philip II, engaged overseas in the conquest of the Americas, while on this side of the ocean, it was embroiled in wars with the Turks on the one hand and the Protestants on the other. In this Spain, Rodrigo is both a representative and exceptional son of the Spain which is at the height of its imperial splendor, a proud man with a heart that is immeasurably greedy and jealous. This is what the Grand Chancellor would describe him when recommending him to the king. And so Rodrigo is the prototype of the conquistador, the very embodiment of eros in its virile form, so of desire that tries and catch and make his own.
Stato un conquistador.
To tell the truth, however, Rodrigo has not always been a conquistador. In his early youth, he too, like his brother, had been a Jesuit novice, but he had left the order to devote himself to something quite other than God. His brother, on the verge of breathing his last, remembers him, and so he prays to God for Rodrigo. My God, I pray for my brother Rodrigo. I implore you for my son Rodrigo. You see, at first he followed my footsteps after the banner bearing your name. And now, probably because he actually is thinking of turning his back on you, he believes that his task is not to wait, but rather to conquer and possess whatever he can, as if nothing belonged to you, and as if he could be anywhere other than where you are. But, Lord, it is not so easy to escape you. And if he does not come to you through what is clear, let him come to you through what is obscure. And if he does not come to you by the direct path, let him come to you by an indirect one. If not through what is simple, let him come to you through what is manifold, laborious, and confused within him. And if he desires evil, let it be an evil such that it can be compatible only with good. And if he desires disorder, let it be such a disorder that entails the shaking and the collapse of the walls that barred his path to salvation. This I say to him and to this multitude obscurely entangled with him, because he is one of those who cannot be saved unless they bring to salvation with them the whole mass that shapes behind him. And this is already a great spirit. He's a great leader. And so his conversion entails great changes, not only for him, but for other people as well. So, and you had already taught him to desire, yet he knows nothing as yet of what it means to be desired. Teach him that you are not the only one who can be absent. Bind him with the height of this other being, so beautiful without him, who calls to him across the distance. make him a wounded man, because once in this life he beheld the face of an angel. Fill those lovers with such a longing that the absence of each other's presence in their daily lives seems to them to be one and the one of their very essence, as though God had conceived them in an unquenchable bond. In this way, one understands why Prodezza's guardian angel, who will then be embodied, and we will read a dialogue between the two. So that's why the guardian angel will be able to tell her at the fateful hour when all will be revealed that she is the bait God has chosen to draw Rodrigo to himself. Indeed, it is precisely Prodezza's incurable wound of desire, at once paradise and hell, because he cannot have her, that becomes the means God uses to initiate him into the experience of longing. The experience of the longing for the one who is the unattainable beloved par excellence, as the mystics and the Song of Songs teach us. By entering his heart, whilst at the same time eluding his grasp, Prodezza will have the task of transforming the conquistador's proud heart into a wounded and humble heart, into a heart that knows what it means to depend on another being. Without love, whose love and presence one is nothing and possesses nothing, and therefore into a heart now capable of understanding, to the point of feeling it in the flesh, who God truly is. That proud man, the angel will say to Prodezza, there was no other way to enter his flesh. There was no other way to make him understand dependence, necessity, and need. Prodezza herself, even before being enlightened by the angel, will show that she has fully understood all of this. Since I cannot give him heaven, this is what she will say, talking about him, talking about her beloved one, about her lover, I can at least tear him away from the earth. So Christ on the cross, suspended between sky and earth. So I alone can provide him with a lack that corresponds to the measure of his desire. How beautiful this is for Claudel, as indeed for Plato, of Dante, and in his own way also Leopardi before him, as we learned. This is the distinctive power of the beauty of the beloved's face, to kindle in the heart a thirst for what which is not, through its very splendor, to be a promise, as Rodrigo will say, so to be a promise that nothing in the world can satisfy, not even that woman who, for a moment, has become its vessel for us. So all this is true, and yet, I'm now coming back to actually the initial question, and yet, is this the full extent of the role that Providence assigns to Prodezza in Rodrigo's life? If that were the case, we would not, in essence, have gone beyond the Platonic conception of the sign, according to which the beloved face has, in essence, no other tasks than to lead through itself, beyond itself, as enshrined, as stated in the Symposium by Plato. This is quite disappointing. This is what we perceive, the disappointment. So we must ask ourselves, is this Prodezza's only role in Rodrigo's life? And this is what we must ascertain by delving into the details of the story. So I'm going to basically tell you the story for key moments, and I will also skip some parts that are not necessary. So the first moment, the spark of passion. We should start. Where else should we start, if not from here? So the two meet by chance when Rodrigo, returning from America, stops off at the castle of the governor of Morocco, the elderly Don Pelagio, the husband of Donna Prodezza. And you already understand here why that was an impossible love. Donna Prodezza was married. We are at the end of the 16th century, so no divorce. So the spark of passion, we will then see that there was a deeper reason for that. Prodezza wanted to be faithful to her husband, to the yes that she pronounced to God. So the spark of passion ignites immediately, as devastating as an earthquake, as overwhelming as the waters of a wild torrent. But it's only passion. So based on what Rodrigo is trying to explain to his Chinese servant, not at all. Certainly, in Rodrigo's Platonic claims, in his insistence on the sublimity of his feelings and the nobility of the reasons why he is rushing to the rendezvous, the secret rendezvous that Prodezza has secretly arranged for him, there is much that is ambiguous. And so the wise Chinese servant is right to tease him. It would also be very nice to read the dialogue between Rodrigo and the servant, but we won't have time, and it's also quite sophisticated. So he instinctively senses that in the passion of this savior, of other men's wives, there is more desire, carnal desire and selfishness that Rodrigo is willing to admit, even to himself. And yet, is that all there too? In my view, it is right to say no. Clearly, what actually pushes Rodrigo towards Prodezza is from the very beginning something more mysterious and indefinable than a mere passing carnal infatuation. So what is it that he truly seeks? So when he meets this woman, he speaks of joy. The joy that wells up in the hearts of lovers so that they recognize their mutual need for one another in admiration, in gratitude. There's a reconnaissance, there's a word play here from the French. It means gratitude, but also being able to recognize the person once again. It is as if by meeting her, he felt that he was destined to meet her. So, riconoscimento in Italian means recognition. It seems that basically you are seeing somebody for the first time. You are expecting him for the first time. So in a gratitude and in mutual desire that are a reward in themselves. They are basically in themselves bliss, divine life, victory over death. And I quote, she was already looking at me with that face that destroys death, because actually what do we call death if not ceasing to be necessary? So life without the experience of this reciprocal mutual desire is like a life that is not fulfilled. And for this reason, Rodrigo basically is ready to renounce the mission entrusted to him by God, so a reign as vast as the world. So he's destined to become the deputy king of the Indias. So is this really the joy that he felt promised in the eyes of Prodezza? Let us leave this question open and let us turn our attention to Prodezza.
Things are different for her. Prodessa shows full awareness of the sacred nature of the bond that ties her to her husband. Now let's try to give some further context. Here we are talking about a wedding between a man that had a certain age. So it was previously agreed that they were supposed to get married. We shouldn't think about today's weddings. This was agreed in advance, and Prodessa obeyed to accept that wedding. Don Pelagio, as well as being very kind of old, is an austere and, on the surface, cold man. And Prodessa describes him as being like a deserted and dark house in which he leaves her alone for most of the day. Actually, in his own way, Don Pelagio loves Prodessa, but she fails to perceive this. And she feels nothing but respect for her husband. Sent by him under escort to Catalonia, Prodessa, as we said, arranges to meet Rodrigo at an inn, where he is to come and kidnap her. So let's move to the second big picture scene, which is called the gift of the slipper. While talking to Don Balthazar, her escort, Prodessa suddenly notices a statue of the Virgin Mary by the side of the road. So as if she was struck by inspiration, she stops the mule on which she is sitting. She stands up in the saddle and, removing one of the two satin slippers she is wearing, and that's the title of this work which comes from this scene, she places it in the Virgin's hands, addressing her with these words, and I quote, "Virgin, patroness and mother of this house," which was her husband's house, of Pelagio's house, "guardian and protector of that man whose heart is more open to you than to me, companion in his long solitude. If not for my sake, then for his. For the bond between him and me was not my doing, but the result of your intervening will." She recognizes the will of God here. "Prevent me from being in this house whose door you guard a cause of corruption. I cannot say that I understand the man you have chosen for me, but I do understand that you are his mother as well as mine. So, while there is still time, holding my heart in one hand and my slipper in the other, I entrust myself to you. Virgin Mother, I give you my slipper. Virgin Mother, keep my wretched foot safe in your hand. I warn you that very soon I shall no longer see you, and that I'm about to do everything against you." That's very interesting. "But when I try to throw myself towards evil, may it be with a lame foot, and when I wish to fly beyond the barrier you have set, may it be with a clipped wing. I have done all I could, and you keep my poor little shoe, my slipper, and keep it close to your heart, O great and terrible Mother." Just a couple of remarks and comments on this crucial scene. The first comment: in the clear simplicity of her heart, Prodessa makes no excuses. She knows that her bond with her husband is willed and sealed by God, and that therefore any breach of that bond is a breach of faith towards God, and thus a loss of self. But she also knows that the intensity of her passion for Rodrigo is such as to rob her of the strength to resist it. Hence the gesture, symbolic and yet so physical. She places her little shoe, her slipper, in the Virgin's hands, as if asking her to become the guardian of a chastity that Prodessa finds impossible to maintain. And we know that in the Bible already, foot has always been a sign for an action, a movement, a material action. A secret affinity despite the huge distance between them. Thus emerged between the sinner Prodessa and the Holy Virgin. Of course, the Virgin Mary didn't experience the flames of passion, the trial of overwhelming eros. Yet she, as well, had to believe in the impossible. She had to say her free yes to a call that seemed to overwhelm her on all sides. Prodessa does the same with a simple and fearless heart. She entrusts her impossible chastity to God through the hands of the Virgin, and God, even with immense tribulation, will grant her wish. And then a second comment. In Prodessa's gesture, in my view, there is also another more subtle but important nuance of meaning. While she speaks, Prodessa holds the slipper in one hand, which she then hands over to the Virgin, and in the other her own heart. It goes without saying that she cannot tear her heart from her breast to place it in the Virgin's hands. However, the distinction between this, in my opinion, is not by chance. Prodessa doesn't hand her heart over to the Virgin. And why? So why? She does not do so, not only because she cannot, but also because she doesn't want to. In other words, by offering her slipper to the Virgin with one hand, Prodessa asks for the grace to be kept from falling into sin with Rodrigo, but by holding her own heart in the other hand, however, she refuses to renounce to the love that draws her towards him. So the real question is, does it make sense to have this kind of division? Isn't that wrong, maybe? Does it make sense to try to hold both things together? Can salvation from Rodrigo be at the same time the salvation of Rodrigo, that is, of Prodessa's love for him? This is crazy, and that's the reason why the name of our protagonist is Prodessa. It's the sort of thing acrobats and tightrope walkers do. For falling to one side or the other seems inevitable. To the left, the easier fall. Driven by passion and instinct, one falls into carnal sin, into the idolatry of the beloved one. With all the consequences that this could involve. And on the right, there is another fall. Driven by the fear of suffering, one renounces to love, but in doing so falls into another abyss, that of hardened heart. It is walking along the ridge, which is fit for the brave. To love without clinging, to love with intensity, and at the same time with a strength of sacrifice proportional to that intensity. That is what is difficult. And this is the path that Prodessa, not without hesitation and risks, will set out upon. But here again, a path leading where? What's the goal? Why keep alive a love that cannot reach fulfillment? We get back to the question we have already asked ourselves with Rodrigo. To what end, to what joys can this love aim at? For what purpose does it exist, and is it given? Prodessa doesn't yet ask herself these questions. She knows only that she cannot help but love Rodrigo and that he needs her. So we move to the next session, the longest one actually. Per aspera ad astra, the path of sacrifice. Well, actually, there's also another one after that. So at this point, I have to summarize. Events come thick and fast. Prodezza manages to run away and reaches Rodrigo, but due to a daring series of events, she finds him seriously injured. Together they find refuge in the castle of Rodrigo's mother, Lady Honoria. Don Pelagio, having been informed of what has happened, goes to the castle, where he has an intense and frank confrontation and dialogue with his wife. It would be nice to read this dialogue, which, in my opinion, is very nice. Often misunderstood because Don Pelagio is a very good character, in my opinion. So, although embittered, he proves capable of speaking wisely. First of all, he points out to his wife that she cannot give herself entirely to Rodrigo, as she claims to desire. For the simple reason that she has already once and for all given her soul not to Pelagio but to God, of whom Pelagio, as a husband, is a minister. What she would give to Rodrigo, therefore, is neither happiness nor salvation, but merely that pleasure which once tasted extinguishes desire and sweeps away all enchantment. It will not be enough for him. You can give him only limited things. Prodezza, while not objecting, now raises the crucial question that always arises in such situations. And I just quote a couple of sentences between Lady Prodezza and his husband. She says, "Has such a desire therefore been given to me for evil?" And that's the huge objection. And the answer from Don Pelagio is, "No, Prodezza." He is the husband. "Why should you not be capable of doing him good?" Don Pelagio's answer, which shall be further explained more in details, well, Don Pelagio's answer shows the full extent of his wisdom. He doesn't blame Prodezza's love for Rodrigo. Rather, he invites her to transform her desire for him into a passion for his good. Or, to use an expression dear to Don Giussani, for his destiny. Does Prodezza not know of the great mission to which the king has destined Rodrigo? Does she not know that he has been chosen to become deputy king of the Indies, to unite entire worlds under the wing of the true God? Let him go if she truly wishes him well. Let prove that she, as well, is ready to take on an equally heroic mission, one worthy of her generous and ardent soul, eager to give of herself. And that's the proposal she makes for the destiny of Prodezza. Let her agree to settle as his vicar in Mogador, in Morocco, the outermost Spanish stronghold in Morocco, with the task, on the one hand, of holding back the Turks, and on the other, of keeping at bay the fortress' current lieutenant, the sinister Don Camillo, another very interesting character, an unbeliever and perhaps in league with the Turks, yet he too is hopelessly in love with Prodezza, and therefore more easily tamed by her than by anyone else. The sacrifice that Pelagio asks of Prodezza is therefore not an end in itself, nor is it a renunciation of love. Never in Claudel, as has already been said, is sacrifice an arbitrary no to love. Rather, it is a generous willingness to fulfill love in its fullest meaning, which is to serve the whole. So the kingdom of God in the world. Even better, it is a readiness to channel the surge of the water of one's own arrows into the banks of the plan of the one who is at the origin of both the world and love itself. And it is therefore a liberation and not a castration of its enormous, huge potential. So one understands the foresight behind Don Pelagio's seemingly ruthless proposal to his wife. And the even greater foresight of King Philip, who after Prodeza has accepted her husband's proposal and has now moved to Morocco, decides to send Rodrigo himself to deliver a letter to her personally, in which the king releases the woman from any duty towards the crown. And he leaves her free to choose whether or not to stay in Mogador. This move is smart. And this way, the king is convinced he's killing two birds with one stone. The first, and the one that, as being a king, matters most to him, is to free, and we will see now why, is to free Rodrigo from the doubt that Prodeza has settled in Mogador because she no longer loves him. The king, in fact, knows very well that the knowledge of being loved by Prodeza can become, as indeed it will, the most inexhaustible of sources of energy for Rodrigo, as he faces the challenging mission that awaits for him. He knows full well, as the smart psychologist that he is, that joy alone is the mother of sacrifice. Therefore, let the two speak to one another. Let them exchange unforgettable words, words that may be etched forever into their souls. The king hopes for this with all his heart, and I quote, this is the king, Philip, talking, "I want to drive so much fuel into his heart with a single blow." And that's a very interesting image with this, talking about the fuel, with a single blow that he will have enough for the rest of his life. I want him to see the face of the woman he loves one more time in his life. Let him look at her and be intoxicated by her, and let her take him with her. Let them look at one another face to face once and for all. Let him know that she loves him and that he possesses her, but only to the extent of her own will, and let him part from her by virtue of his own pure will, forever, never to see her again. There may be lots of things and comments to add here. And then the second one, completing the previous one, which is to allow Prodeza to reveal to Rodrigo not only her love, but also her decision to stay in Mogador, so to part from him forever. For this, though, the king needs Rodrigo's unfulfilled love for Prodeza to serve at the same time as a driving force that spurs him on to ever new conquests in a relentless pursuit that finds no peace, and as a break that detaches him from the object of his conquests, since the worlds he gradually brings together are never anything but a reflection of the reunion towards which his heart truly yearns. So this feeling of lack of fulfillment. So the picture thus begins to become clearer, and yet, is this all the good that can spring from the love between Prodeza and Rodrigo? So let's get back to the story. Rodrigo sets off for Mogador. There he meets Don Camillo, who passes on a curt message from Prodeza: "I'm staying, you go." But Rodrigo doesn't give up. He wants to see her. Don Camillo, consumed as he is by jealousy, because we know that he is in love with Prodeza, then casts doubt on the sincerity of Rodrigo's love. Behind his desire to see Prodeza at all costs lies nothing but the intention to take advantage of her, to satisfy his will. before setting off to conquer half the world overseas. So that's how Don Camillo blames Rodrigo. So at this point, Rodrigo gives Don Camillo an answer that deserves our attention, and we will get back to that later. If he wants to see Prodezza, it is because before he leaves, he must, and be careful here, he must receive from her that thing which she alone, she's the only one that can give me. So, what's the thing? Well, Don Camillo mockingly asks, what thing? And the answer, very interesting answer, is, how can I know it unless I receive it? So he doesn't even know what he wants. This brings us back to the enigmatic paradox we have already emphasized. Not even Rodrigo truly knows what he wants from Prodezza. That is, what the desire, the ineffable desire she has kindled in him actually is. That night, beneath the gaze of the moon, the long-awaited meeting finally takes place, the only one in all the work. The two exchange, whilst embracing, just a single kiss. But in this case, something far deeper than a simple physical and emotional contact takes place. So we know here that Claudel had been in Japan and in China. He was expert of the theater of shadows. So there is this shadow, which is the melting of the two beyond the moon. And there is this song, the song of the shadow, because it existed only for a second, and then the two are separated forever. And this exists once and for all. And then there is this song of the shadow, which is one of the best part of the best poem of Claudel, but we don't have enough time here to go deeper into details about that. So basically, through this kiss, there is a kind of penetration of the interpenetration of souls that takes place here. So at this point, Rodrigo sets sail and leaves Mogador, his heart intoxicated with both ecstasy and anguish. And he says, here it is, then, deep within my being, this wound that you could only have inflicted upon me with your eyes closed, so basically with a kiss. It is you who opened my paradise to me, and it is you who prevent me from staying and remaining here. It is in this wound that I find you again. It is through it that I feed on you, just as a lamp feeds on oil. We no longer have lamps fitted with oil, but this is an image very strong, very powerful if we think about it. So what was the answer to the riddle? It is first entrusted to the voice of the moon, she whose task is to shed light in the darkness of the night and to console in the hour of affliction. And that's also the reason why also Leopardi loves moon, isn't it? But then the voice of Prodezza echoes that of the moon, as though the woman, having drunk her fill of the rays of her nocturnal light, so it's lightning rays facing challenges that we don't know, we cannot even understand them, as it has somehow imbibed its wisdom. And I will now quote again part of the text, so I'll try to be quick because we are running out of time. So Prodezza says, never. Here at least there is something for him and for me that we can share. It is this never. That he learned from my lips in that kiss that made us one thing. Never. There is at least a sort of eternity here with us, which can begin immediately. Never again shall I cease to long for him, nor shall he cease to long for me. There is someone with God who forever forbids him the presence of my body. He would have loved it too much. Oh yes, I want to give him much more. What will be left for him, even if I were to give it to him, as if what his eyes, sensing it, are asking of me were something that could ever come to an end. I must give him what he asks of me. It is not enough to wrong him. I want to betray him. This will literally happen, because we will see that she will finally get married with Don Camillo a few years after, when his husband passed away. This is what he learned from me in that kiss which united our souls. Why on earth should I deny him what his heart desires? Why should the death I can at least give him not be complete, since he expects no joy whatsoever from me? Has he spared me? Why should I spare him what lies deepest within him? Why deny him that fatal blow whose coming I see in his eyes, which I already read at the very depth of his hopeless gaze? Yes, I know that he will marry me only on the cross, as Jesus Christ did with the church, and that our souls will be united only in death and in the night, beyond all human reasons. If I cannot be his paradise, at least I can be his cross. If it is a matter of tearing his soul apart from his body, I can well do the work of those two pieces of wood that cross. Since I cannot give him heaven, at least I can tear him away from the earth. I alone can provide him with a luck commensurate with his desire, and when I have held him by every limb of his body and by every fiber of his flesh, and being through those nails driven deep into me, when there is no longer any way to escape, when he is bound to me in this impossible marriage, when there is no longer any way to tear himself away from the grip of my powerful flesh and from this merciless void, well, it is then that I shall present him to God, exposed and torn, so that he may feel him in a clap of thunder. And it is then that I shall have a husband and hold a God in my arms. My God, I shall see his joy. I shall see it with you, and it is I who shall be the cause of it. God asked a woman and she was able to give it to him. For there is nothing in heaven or on earth that love is not capable of giving.
The paradoxical answer to Rodrigo's question is, therefore, what was he looking for? Without knowing it, he was looking for the cross. This is what he was actually seeking, the cross, that very cross which Prodezza herself will become for him by virtue of a desire, whose power will nail him hand and foot to her, and yet in precisely this way, like an invisible jack, it will lift him from the ground, for it will prevent him from clinging to anything else. Yes, Prodezza will be Rodrigo's cross, and though here the word cross, and this is something we've just seen, the word cross doesn't mean merely pain, as we often tend to believe. Rather, that pain which, while purifying heart, soul, and flesh, lifts one up to God, and therefore it is a path to joy. My God, I shall see her joy, and I shall be the cause of it. Is that all? Is this the sole meaning of the separation that will unite are lovers in a paradoxical marriage until death reunites them? No. There is at least one more thing to say. But in order to say it, we must say a few words about what happens next. And this leads me to the last point, the last excerpt. If the grain of wheat that falls to the ground doesn't die, a sacrifice that bears much fruit. As the curtain rises on day 3, we are transported far forward in time. More than 10 years have passed since Rodrigo's departure. Don Pelagio is now dead, and Prodezza has finally agreed to marry Don Camillo, by whom she also had a daughter, whom she has named Maria Sette Spade. And actually this name, a name literally which has a very strong symbolic meaning. So the image around which everything in day 3 revolves is that of the rosary bead, which, while Prodezza was praying on the beach of Mogador, fell and was lost in the sand. And this, of course, is a strong reference to what John wrote. So the grain of wheat that fell to the sand. Don Camillo finds it and places it in the hand of Prodezza, whom we find lying in bed, now ill and perhaps nearing the end. What is this rosary bead that fell into the scorching desert sand, if not a symbol of what Prodezza did to herself by burying herself alive in Mogador? What else have the past years been, if not the transformation of her soul and body into a pure and total offering to God? But above all, to what end is this invisible offering, this casting aside of herself, lost and forgotten in the infinite nothingness of the desert? Prodezza has long since answered this question for herself. So, gazing in a dream at the rosary bead she holds in her hand, she sees it transform into a bluish sphere rotating slowly, an image of the globe. So her sacrifice is not in vain. With her yes to God, she is contributing to the fulfillment of Rodrigo's mission, whom she sees in her dream digging the Panama Canal and sail towards the farthest reaches of the world, all the way to Japan. And is it not true that by dissolving into death, so that you don't have by a body or face, she will, on the other hand, finally be close to him in spirit, as faith teaches? Yes, Prodezza knows all this, and yet a very stubborn part of her rebels against this idea. So her feminine flesh, the woman within her, doesn't want to go to heaven. She wants to hold Rodrigo in her arms once more. At this point, there's a new figure emerging from the forests of Japan. And the new person is her guardian angel. This is a key moment. So the dialogue between the two, tense and intense, is one of the most sublime passages in the work. We cannot follow it in its entirety. A couple of brush strokes will suffice to capture its essence. So first of all, the angel appears as a fisherman who, having hooked Prodezza's soul, wishes to reel her, to cast her at last into the sea of heaven, where eternal freedom awaits her. But Prodezza, like a rebellious fish, doesn't want to give in. Leave Rodrigo down here, be reft of her? No, absolutely not. The angel then, to help her overcome her doubts and her resistance, decides to reveal to her the task that she had in God's plans, and which she has now carried out admirably, namely to be the bait through which Rodrigo too might fall into the network of those who have been saved. So it was good. It was a good thing that he loved me. It was for the best that you taught him desire. And then Prodezza said, the desire for an illusion, for a shadow that forever eludes him. She's protesting here. The desire is a desire for what is. Illusion is what is not. So desire through illusion is the desire for what is through what is not. So this was a wonderful reply by Prodezza, but I am not an illusion. I exist. The good that I alone can give him exists. So here is the final major objection to which the angel must respond. Was Prodezza's role in the drama then merely to play the part of a mirage, an optical illusion, a trap devised by God to make Rodrigo thirsty for something other than anything he could hold and possess? Was she merely a means of a means of stripping Rodrigo of her taste for the things of the world? Oftentimes we make confusion between this sign and this, but this is not the vision of the sacraments of the Christianity. This role was just like I said, a means of stripping Rodrigo of his taste for the things of his world by revealing to him that they are nothing, and thus redirecting his desire towards the one God that truly is. This role is not enough for Prodezza. I am not an illusion, I exist, and so does the good that I alone can bestow upon him. She refuses to be a fictitious good in Rodrigo's soul and eye. She wants to be real, a real good, and therefore an eternal one. For everything that is not eternal is not real. So a good that was not eternal, what kind of good would that be? But now, at this stage, the roles reverse. So the angel, who was God's defender, transforms into Prodezza's lawyer and her love for Rodrigo. That is why he replies, we must give him well and not good. But cruelly dragged along by you, I cannot give him anything at all. This is what she says. Would you wish him to give evil? Yes, rather than remain so barren and unfruitful, what you call evil. Prodezza, my sister, God's creature within you exists. But what is it, the point of existing, if I do not exist for him? And Rodrigo said, well, it was in him that you were needed. At this stage, Prodezza is kind of disrupted. This is a very sweet word to pronounce. Let me repeat it after you. How? How was I necessary to him? Not this wicked and ungainly creature at the end of my line, of my telephone line, and not this sad fish. So, Prodezza, the daughter of God, Veiler, my sister, the daughter of God who is in the light and whom I greet, this Prodezza that the angels see, it is her whom he gazes upon without realizing it. And it is the very same Prodezza, one that death would not destroy. And will she be the same, always beautiful and everlasting beauty? Will he always love me? Well, actually, what makes you so beautiful cannot die. What makes him love you cannot die. It was lovely, however, to be a woman for him, and I shall make you a star. But I am an ember beneath the ashes, and I shall make you a star blazing in the breath of the Holy Spirit. So, farewell then, world below. Farewell, farewell forever, my beloved Rodrigo, who remains down there. Why farewell? Why farewell? Why over there? When you will be closer to him than you are now, united on the other side of the veil with that cause that actually gives him life. So he's looking for me and he will never find me again. How could he find you outside himself when you will be nowhere else but within his heart, within him? What follows is the baptism of fire, which amidst spasms of agony and ecstasy purifies and transforms Prodezza in such a way that she for a few moments can have a foretaste of what she's about to become. And everything at last becomes clear to her. By ascending to heaven, she will not step aside at all, but she will become a star whose light is at once her own, for it bears forever the unmistakable outline of her body, and yet not her own, because the flame that this light produces is that of God's love, which will now fill her entirely. It's already filling it in now. Just as Jesus, by making his body and blood a pure offering of love to the Father for those he loves, does not separate himself from Mary Magdalene, but makes his glorified body the means of union between himself, Mary, and the Father. This is what Eucharisty is all about. And so too will Prodezza, in ascending to heaven, not vanish from Rodrigo's horizon, but become a star that guides and sustains him on the path leading to the fullness of life. Take, Rodrigo, she will say to her beloved. So take it, take my dear, take my God that fills me with himself. The strength by which I love you is no different than the one that brings you into being, since I am always linked to what is giving you eternal life. Here I'm going to jump everything because now I'm going to go to the conclusions, but we should actually say about the path that Rodrigo will have to do to become so fulfilled in terms of light and fire as Prodezza's. But I'd like to draw to a close in a couple of minutes. So, in what sense then a love like the one's becomes a good that he uses Ad Maiorem Gloria? This happens twofold. First, the wound opened in the Rodrigo and Prodezza's heart ultimately ends up producing in times and ways that differ for each of them a paradoxical effect, curiously similar to the fruits sought by asceticism, like the two greatest Spanish mystics. So basically, it empties them, drains them, and strips them of everything, hushing them into a desert where nothing can be felt. And actually, there is this emptiness discovered by the fact that this becomes a free place for God, the one that becomes a free space for God, a space that the flame of infinite love can flood with itself at the very moment when the heart, exhausted by thirst, finally surrenders and abandons himself entirely to him. The fire of desire, merging with the blaze of divine charity, is thus transformed into a fervor of selfless giving, into a surge of joyful love that embraces all and delights in all in pure freedom. Everything is restored, not only the much-beloved face, but along with it the sky and the sea and the whole world, in an invisible embrace that extends to all things and inhales their fragrance. Yes, I know, Rodrigo will say to Fra Leone in the dialogue confession in which he describes the mysterious new freedom into which he feels that he is entering. At the very moment when he lies in the chains, in the hold of a ship, mutilated, humiliated, mocked, and at risk of being sold into slavery. This was what Prodezza had come to bring him, along with her face, the sea and the stars. I feel it within me. I look at them and cannot get enough of them. Yes, I feel that we cannot escape them, and that it is impossible to die. There is, however, a second meaning, inseparable from the first, in which Rodrigo and Prodezza's passion brings glory to God, precisely by virtue of the blood that flows from the pierced hearts of the two lovers in the long ordeal of a journey of sacrifice, accepted not without rebellion and resistance. This love gradually becomes grafted into the great mystery of the fruitfulness of the cross, that is, of the redemption of the world. The blood shed in the name of obedience to God, which seems to prevent both the consummation and the fruitfulness of love, is transformed by God into blood which, precisely because it is given by one for the sake of the other's destiny, and by one together with the other, becomes a fruitful force, creating a people. Just as infinitely fruitful was the shared piercing of the heart of the new Adam and of the soul of the Virgin in the great hour of the cross. And I'm finished. Thank you very much, Father Paolo. I mean, this latest sentence, this is what Prodezza had come to bring him together with her face, the sea and the star. That has very much to deal with the name of the meeting, title of the meeting this year. So thanks a lot for having helped us go deeper into this love. Thank you very much. Thank you all for participating in this session. We would like to thank you. I would like to thank you to support Trace. Thanks to you, we can organize this kind of events. But it's also important to support the Rimini meeting. In the trade ground, you find the Dona Ora desks to donate. And thanks a lot for participating. Thank you.
Questo è un luogo che genera dialogo,
qualcuno che si impegna, che si batte,
che approfondisce la conoscenza e sostiene la fiducia. È un crocevia dove si incontra chi desidera il vero, il bello, il giusto e il bene. È una testimonianza di speranza nel cuore ferito del presente. E tutto questo
proporre con la propria vita
esiste anche grazie a te.